understand that anybody other than us, Lorenzo, and the heads of the 5 families, who discover that you are the anteater, is going to have to be silenced, because you are not going to be able to take the chance that under pressure, they won't reveal your identity. Your mother's life, the lives of your siblings, and the life of the girl you love are depending on you protecting that identity. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Short Stories, Promise Ring, Part 4. When Samuel left Puerto Rico, after having a conversation with Q about helping his son put in work, he was way more excited than he should have been about having the opportunity to do for Michael what he'd done for his father when he was 15 years old. It wasn't so much that he wanted to help his nephew participate in violent activities. It was about being instrumental in helping that young boy become a man. And it was also about ensuring that when it was time, Michael would be playing for the Baptiste team. As interconnected as all of the families in the Notorious Five Families were, Samuel had a vested interest in ensuring that his children and their children, his sister's children, their children, and their children would choose to put in work for the Baptiste family if they were going to choose to put in work. His nephew Q, who had the opportunity to choose between leading the Baptiste family or leading the St. James family, had chosen not to be in that world at all. Right up until his hand was forced, and he realized that the only way the Notorious Five Families were going to successfully take down the international trafficking organization was if they had a strong leader at the head of the St. James family. His Aunt Catherine, his Uncle Nigel's wife, was the one who was really running the show, and she was fully capable of doing that. But throughout his uncle's reign, she'd been behind the scenes, and in order to do what she did best, she needed to stay there. The discovery that his uncle had 5 illegitimate children meant that any one of them could step up to the plate. But in order to do that, they would need years of preparation, because their father had never told them who he really was or how he really earned his living. And the son he had told, his second son, Saint, had already chosen to be in the life as a finisher and had zero interest in being the kingpin. So Q had reluctantly agreed to be the face of the family. His oldest son, Michael, was now in a position where he would be able to choose, and not just between the Baptiste and St. James organizations, but with his adoption as Angela's son, he also could choose the Lopez or Charles organizations. And while any of those would be just fine, the number of offspring that the St. James and Lopez organizations had to choose from already were significantly greater than the number that the Baptiste family had to choose from. To add to that, his sister Bella's relationship with Idra Charles, the head of the Charles family, was most likely going to result in a marriage. And with no offspring of Idra's own, and no other potential heirs to the throne in the Charles family, the Queen Mother and Idra's pending union would make all of Bella's children, grandchildren, and so on eligible for roles in the Charles family too. And whether their parents liked it or not, every one of the heads of the respective organizations in the 5 families were keeping a close eye on the skill sets, talents, and activities of the St. James offspring. Every one of them was just waiting and watching for an opportunity to be of service to the next generation, to mentor them, shape, and mold them for whatever role in their respective organizations they believed the children would be good at. And unlike their predecessors, they'd agreed not to go to the lengths that king and queen pins were known for. They'd agreed not to manipulate the children, back them in any corners, or put them in any positions that would leave them without a choice. Their parents wanted them to have the opportunity to choose for themselves whether they would go into the legitimate or the not so legitimate business. As a matter of fact, Angela, who Michael believed wasn't involved in any way, shape, form, or fashion with the Notorious Five Families, had jumped in with both feet to help the families reorganize and restructure, solely for the purpose of ensuring that her children would have a legitimate lane. She had no clue that Samuel was on his way to Texas, and he was on his way to help her son make a decision that she was not going to agree with. She also had no clue that her husband had given the okay. So when Samuel got to the family complex and heard Michael and Donovan out, his mind had already been made up. He just had to give Michael a hard time, because he needed to be sure that the young boy had his head on straight, that he wouldn't take any action without Samuel being in the know, and that every decision that he made would be well thought out and executed with a level of precision and expertise that Michael would not be able to independently carry out. He needed to ensure that Michael would be able to demonstrate the level of self-control, patience, and calculation that was required to meet his goals, rescuing Tamara and making each and every person responsible for or connected to her kidnapping pay. And no matter what Samuel helped Michael do, the end result had to be in the Notorious Five Families' best interest, because it was bigger than Tamara's rescue. Michael's father, Samuel's oldest nephew, had one goal and one goal only: destroying the international trafficking organization, ending the war between them and the five families, and keeping every person connected to him safe. And Samuel couldn't allow Michael to do anything that would make it more difficult for Q to achieve that goal. When Michael told his Uncle Samuel that he wanted to kidnap DeAndre and torture him until he told him everything, Samuel said, "Nephew, you've got to be smarter than that. You can't go off half-cocked, and you can't just kidnap the son of a congressman." Michael said, "The hell I can't. If you're not going to help me, I'm going to get it done." Samuel said, "I'm going to help you, but you won't get anything done, not anything effective, if you aren't willing to listen and learn. You are absolutely a smart young man, and you are extremely talented. I have no doubt that you can come up with a plan to snatch that boy and hold his feet to the fire. But somebody is going to be blamed for his disappearance. Do you want that to be you? And depending on how you execute it, the people who have Tamara are going to be in the know. Are you willing to put her in more danger just to make DeAndre feel your pain?" Michael, realizing that his uncle was right, said, "Just tell me what to do or how to do it, and I'm going to do it. I just need to know you on my side, and you're not going to stop me from making the moves that need to be made." Samuel said, "I'm not. We will do whatever you want to do. I just need what you want to do to make dollars and cents. This girl is counting on you. From what I understand, she's already learned that she can rely on you. That means you can't screw this up. You can't make it worse. And I can't help you do either of those things. Now, in your little crew, is there anybody who you know you can depend on?" Michael said, "I don't have a crew. I got one friend, and he's solid." Samuel asked, "Will he follow your lead? Do whatever you ask without question? Will he keep your secrets? And is he good at it?" Well, Michael said, "Hell yeah." Samuel said, "All right, so this is what we're going to do. If you tapped into Resurrection, then you know how much time Michael spent with his Uncle Samuel. You also know how dissatisfied Angela was with that fact. And you also already know that Melissa and her Cane Corso was somehow incorporated into Michael and Samuel's plans. Michael spent days doing surveillance. He'd enlisted the help of his best friend Spider. He'd also enlisted the help of his younger cousin L3, LJ and Regina's oldest son. L3 was only 12 years old, but he was already very adept at surveillance and surveillance equipment, just like his daddy. And he didn't hesitate to help his best friend, his cousin and godbrother Michael. He supplied him with one of the smallest surveillance devices Michael had ever seen. L3 said, "So, is there anything that he used all the time? Something that you know he would never be found without?" When Michael thought about it, he remembered that DeAndre was never seen anywhere without his iPad and his Apple Pencil. L3 said, "Perfect. We'll just swap out his Apple Pencil. I think that I can adapt something that my father taught me about hiding surveillance devices in pens and get inside an Apple Pencil and put this in it. Can you order one? And do you have somebody who can do the switch?" Michael immediately called his friend Spider. They agreed to meet, and Samuel made sure he got to the meetup. When they got together, Michael said, "So listen, I know you already know that Tamara's been kidnapped and DeAndre is involved." Spider said, "Yeah, and he's been sick about it." Michael said, "You're right." Spider said, "No, seriously. He missed a couple of days of school, and since he came back, he has not been himself. He even told me to tell you that he's sorry." Michael said, "I don't want to hear that. Whose side you on?" Spider said, "Whose side I'm on for what?" Michael said, "I'm gonna get my girl back, and I'm gonna make DeAndre pay for it. Are you in or out?" Spider said, "Oh, say less, nigga. I got you. What's up?" So then Michael told Spider the plan. And the following school day, Spider found out exactly which Apple Pencil DeAndre had. Michael had one of the soldiers head to the Apple store and pick one up. And within a matter of minutes, L3 was inside the pencil, and so was the surveillance device. Samuel sent a covert operative to DCA, pretending to be Spider's aunt. Spider had told Michael who was on his emergency contact list, which one of his family members had actually never been to the school. And within 30 minutes, Samuel had the covert operative supplied with an identification, identifying her as Spider's aunt. And within 20 minutes of that, The covert operative was at DCA requesting to see her nephew. He'd forgotten his Apple Pencil at home, and she needed to hand deliver it to him. When he was called to the office, she gave him some quick tips about ways to avoid getting caught, and Spider went into action. He only had one class with DeAndre, and that's why everybody was moving so quickly, because time was of the essence. DeAndre was not the smartest bulb in the box, and while Spider was smart, language arts was just not his strong suit. So he and DeAndre were in remedial English together. In English class, Spider cracked a joke, DeAndre laughed, and Spider went to give him a high five, accidentally knocking the Apple Pencil out of DeAndre's hand. He made sure that when he hit DeAndre's hand, he hit it hard enough that he knocked the pencil clear across the room. And when DeAndre went to get it, Spider said, "My bad, yo, I got you." He walked across the room, picked up the Apple Pencil, slid it up his left sleeve, and slid the replacement down his right. Walked back over to DeAndre, handed it to him, and continued with class like nothing had happened. And over the next few days, Michael monitored that surveillance device like Tamara's life was depending on it. He barely accomplished anything else. Since his mother had taken away all of his technology, he had to hide the cell phone that his Uncle Samuel had provided him. So to make sure he wasn't caught eavesdropping on DeAndre's life, he'd use his technology skills to make some improvements to the software that L3 provided to monitor the audio that the surveillance device picked up. He'd isolated the voices of DeAndre and his parents on the audio that had been recorded and configured the software to record any and every conversation that any of those three individuals had. He had that software working almost like Alexa or Siri without a prompt. He also entered some trigger words into that software to ensure that he would be alerted anytime a conversation was had that could remotely be connected to Tamara's disappearance. This made it possible for him to tap in on DeAndre's life without being caught with that cell phone, and to prolong the battery life of DeAndre's new Apple Pencil, because continuous recording would absolutely drain it. And he didn't need DeAndre taking that pencil into an Apple store to find out why it was all of a sudden not really holding a charge, or to trade it in for an upgrade. I told you these damn kids were smart as hell. Michael could have never guessed that the same story DeAndre told law enforcement, he told anyone else who asked him about his involvement in Tamara's disappearance. He also could have never guessed that the surveillance equipment would pick up Congressman Hill having conversations with Tamara's father that were extremely questionable. The key words that he put in that software had triggered recordings of conversations where the two men had said some of those key words. And those words weren't limited to Tamara. They'd picked up conversations about kidnappings, trafficking. Apparently somebody named Amber had been kidnapped too. And her father was one of the heads of the international trafficking organization. And Tamara's father had business dealings with that man. Apparently, so did Congressman Hill. When Michael heard all of that, he immediately alerted his Uncle Samuel. And when Samuel notified Q told Samuel to put his son on a plane to Puerto Rico. It was time that he have a face-to-face conversation with his son. His wife had no idea what his son was getting himself into. She had her suspicions, and she certainly had her concerns. And he'd done everything that he could, long distance, to reassure her that their son was in good hands, that Uncle Samuel was going to be right beside him every step of the way, and that he wouldn't allow her son to do anything that he wouldn't do if she was the one who needed to be rescued. That last bit did not provide Angela with very much reassurance, though, because she knew exactly how far her husband would go in an effort to protect and save her. And she had no idea that Michael was even leaving the family complex with his Uncle Samuel, let alone that he'd flown to Puerto Rico. When Michael arrived, Q sat his son down. He gave him a high-level overview of the ongoing war between the Notorious Five Families and the International Trafficking Organization. How that war had begun when his Uncle Wood was 8 years old. All of the battles that the families had fought against them. And his overarching goal. When he was done, he called Melissa and he gave them both a lesson in anteaters. And for the first time ever, he asked his children to keep secrets from their mother. He had no difficulty in getting Melissa to wrap her mind around being deceptive, because he'd had a conversation with her older cousin Lorenzo. Lorenzo was the youngest of the Lopez children, the only living son of Emmanuel Lopez, and one of the best hackers Q had ever seen. He was also on the spectrum, just like Melissa. And in order to do what he did as a freelance hacker, he had to learn how to be deceptive. So he'd given his cousin Angela's husband a crash course on how to teach his daughter to keep secrets. While every person on the spectrum is different and they require support in different areas, Lorenzo and Melissa had one thing in common. They were both honest to a fault. They said whatever came to mind, and when asked a question, they were known for going on very lengthy twists and turns that included every minute detail of the story that they wanted to tell. More often than not, though, they left out details that would actually be important to the listener and were super or hyper focused on details that most people wouldn't actually be interested in, making communication rather difficult where important issues were concerned. So their parents had learned how to have those conversations, the questions that they needed to ask to get down to the nitty gritty, and the details that they needed to focus on in order to get a full understanding of what their children were communicating. Angela and Q had become very adept at getting Melissa to share details that she didn't typically realize were important to share. And now Q had the responsibility of teaching his daughter how to maneuver around those kinds of questions if she wanted to help her brother. When the conversation ended, Q helped Michael and Samuel devise a plan that he believed would not only get Tamara rescued, but help to obliterate the international trafficking organization. And that was the start of Operation Anteater. Q said, son, you're going to need to choose a hacker name if you want to maintain your anonymity. Make it something that you can be proud of. Instead of focusing your attention on violence, focus your attention on being 5 steps ahead of an opponent who's an enemy to the very morals and civility that I've spent the last nearly 9 years of your life teaching you to value. Every move you make, every decision has to be well thought out, well planned, and well executed. Understand that anybody other than us, Lorenzo, and the heads of the 5 families who discover that you are the anteater is going to have to be silenced, because you are not going to be able to take the chance that under pressure, they won't reveal your identity. Your mother's life, the lives of your siblings, and the life of the girl you love are depending on you protecting that identity. And that was all Michael needed to hear, because he was off to the races. Everything that he'd overheard and everything that Spider had seen led him to believe that DeAndre was just stupid. Not only did he have no idea that Tamara would be kidnapped, he truly had played no role in the kidnapping. The story he told over and over again had turned out to be the truth. He'd been minding his own business, walking in the local mall, kicking it with his homies and hollering at girls, when a man at a kiosk was selling memorabilia for his favorite NBA team waved him over and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He offered the young boy $5,000 to let him clone his cell phone. And while DeAndre didn't need the money because his family had it in spades, he never passed up an opportunity to get his hands on money that his parents didn't know about, or to make a quick buck. In his mind, he figured he'd take the $5,000, let the man clone his phone, and immediately take his phone to the Apple store, use some of the money the man gave him, and purchase a new phone, just to make sure that the man didn't do anything to his phone, like put spy equipment on it. Because his father had told him that people would do just about anything to get dirt on him and use it against him in his ongoing campaigns for re-election. And he knew just enough about technology to know to never, ever leave any of his devices anywhere where anybody could get their hands on it. Because there was all kind of technology out there that people use to eavesdrop on conversations, access people's financial data, read their text messages, and monitor their online activity. And he didn't want to get caught slipping. Too bad he didn't apply that understanding to his Apple Pencil. So with the $5,000 in hand, DeAndre had headed to the Apple store, replaced the phone, and his parents were none the wiser, because they allowed him to swap out devices like he was changing underwear. He went on about his life, and the next thing he knew, Tamara had been kidnapped. When his father took him down to the police station, where he was questioned about the text messages that he'd been sending Tamara, he was confused as hell, because he hadn't sent that girl any text messages, not since Michael had made a fool out of him on the basketball court. And when law enforcement asked him about meeting up with Tamara to discuss what had occurred between her and Michael at the school's dinner dance and the man that he claimed had been shot, he was royally confused. He'd been needling Tamara about what her and Michael had done in the staircase, but he ain't know nothing about nobody being shot. That was just ludicrous. And it was wild as hell that Tamara would have agreed to meet with him if he did send her such a text message. And he said as much to the police. When his father saw that his son was in huge trouble, he called the interview to a halt and called in a lawyer. And when he, his son, and the lawyer sat down, the lawyer told DeAndre and Congressman Hill exactly what it was that the police had on DeAndre. When the lawyer asked if it was at all possible that someone else had sent the text messages, pretending to be DeAndre and somehow using his phone or phone number. DeAndre immediately remembered the man in the mall. The lawyer knew that DeAndre was going to have to prove that he was not the one who sent the text messages. And while he was willing to believe DeAndre's story, he knew that they were going to have to prove that it was the truth. So he immediately went into action. He told the police that he believed someone else had been sending those messages, and that an interaction that the young boy foolishly had with a man in the mall may be the answer to how that was possible. Police pulled surveillance video from the mall and reviewed every step that DeAndre made that day. They saw his interaction with the man at the kiosk. They saw that man handling DeAndre's phone, connecting it to a computer, and they also saw DeAndre replacing that phone. And with proof in hand that DeAndre was telling the truth, the lawyer and Congressman Hill agreed to allow DeAndre to turn over his cell phone. And after the forensic investigation proved that none of the text messages had been sent from DeAndre's phone, he'd been released, and law enforcement began the arduous task of trying to identify the man from the kiosk. So instead of kidnapping DeAndre and torturing him until he told him everything, because Michael was pretty sure that at that point, he knew everything, he decided to give DeAndre an opportunity to right the wrong that he made, since it was clear that both DeAndre's father and Tamara's thought that Tamara's kidnapping was connected to their dirty deeds. Michael wanted to up the ante. Instead of one of their children being kidnapped, he'd make it two. DeAndre would be a willing participant, kept comfortable, hiding out at one of the family's safe houses, till Michael was able to discover who was actually responsible for her kidnapping and devise a plan to rescue her. So Michael provided his best friend Spider with a cell phone and had Spider agree to get DeAndre to come over to his house to hang out. And that was not an easy feat, because DeAndre and Spider had never been friends. And DeAndre had been so depressed after realizing that his cell phone had been used to kidnap Tamara that he barely left his home other than to go to school. The only thing that Spider had on his side was the fact that while all the other students were suspicious of DeAndre's involvement in Tamara's disappearance, because they'd heard one way or the other that DeAndre had been questioned by the feds. And while he'd basically been exonerated, he was still under constant surveillance. Rumors had abound, and teenagers who knew absolutely nothing about the criminal underworld were accusing DeAndre of making good on his promises to get at Tamara in Michael's absence so that he could get some of what Michael had gotten at the school's dinner dance. Or he was a snitch who turned state's evidence on whoever he'd been in cahoots with to get Tamara kidnapped. So he'd become persona non grata to everyone in his circle, everyone in school, and everybody who was friends with Tamara. Everyone except Spider, who basically befriended DeAndre solely because he felt like DeAndre was getting a bad shake. He believed that DeAndre had nothing to do with Tamara's disappearance, and he could see just how affected DeAndre was by her disappearance and all of the speculation about his role in it. And that was the end he needed to get DeAndre to agree to come over his house. And when he did, Michael was there waiting for him. DeAndre darn it pissed his pants, because he just knew Michael was going to knock his head between the washer and the dryer. He immediately started copping pleas and begging for his life. He said, "Man, I swear to God, I left her alone. I ain't even say nothing else to her. I ain't send those text messages. You gotta believe me." Michael said, "Chill out. I believe you. But if you really want me to believe you, you're gonna have to help me get my girl back. And you're gonna have to help me bring down the people who are responsible for it." I thought long and hard about what to tell you and what not to tell you. And I concluded that I don't gotta tell you a damn thing. DeAndre said, "You're right. You ain't gotta tell me nothing, man. I'll do whatever you want." Michael said, "I know you will. You don't really have a choice. But whether you do it willingly or under duress, there are some things that I believe you deserve to know. I don't like you. Everybody knows that. But I still think you deserve to know what kind of man your father really is. And you deserve to know what he's into so that you can make an informed decision. Because when this is all over, your whole world is going to be changed. I intend to make every single person responsible for Tamara's disappearance, directly or indirectly, wish that their mother swallowed them. And that includes your father."
Now he can do it for himself. Watch him and his uncle cook, bust.
I'm glad you grew up to become that everything you could be. That's all I wanted for you, youngin'. Like father, like son.